6 circles of relationship formed around Jesus in his time on earth. In the outermost circle, there were the crowds, tens of thousands of people curious to learn more about the prophet from Galilee. Next, the 5,000, who journeyed out from their villages in desperate need of something from Jesus. Then the 70, who served Jesus' ministry. They wanted to do something for him. There were the 12, who Jesus called to leave their jobs and the worlds they knew to follow him. Then Peter, James, and John, who fully embraced the joy of Jesus as well as his sufferings. And finally, the one, John, who sat beside him at the Last Supper. He listened more closely than any other and recognized the Savior when no one else did. What can we learn from these circles of relationship about how we can get closer to Jesus today? Jesus is always calling you closer.
And good morning, everybody, and welcome to church. I am so glad you're with us today. If we haven't met, my name is Jason, and I'm one of the pastors here, and I am honored you're here this weekend. We know that there's a million places you could be. We live close to theme parks and beaches and all kinds of fun things to do, but you're here. And so I believe when we come together, we gather in Jesus' name. I believe it honors God, but I believe it changes all of us too. So I'm super glad you're here. Already been a great day experiencing God's presence and worship, and someone told me I look like I've lost some weight, and so it don't get better than that, everybody. Let's get to work today. If you missed the last couple of weeks, we've been in a series called The One Jesus Loves, and it's based on a book written by a good friend of mine named Dr. Robert Crosby. And the whole idea of the book is this, is that at the end of the day, we are as close to God as we choose to be. When it's all said and done, you and I are as close to God as we choose to be. Not as close as he wants, because he wants to be intimately connected to us. We're as close to God as we choose to be. And so in this series, we've been looking at the life of Jesus, and we've been experiencing 6 different circles of relationship that we see in the life of Jesus. And what's fascinating is the closer you get to Jesus, the more it transforms and changes who we are. Here's the 6 circles. We started week 1 by talking about the first 2, the crowds and the 5,000. These are the people who are on the outskirts who watch from a distance. Then there was the 5,000 who was a little closer. They experienced the miracles. Then last week we talked about the 70. These were those who served. Then we talked about, today we're going to talk about the 12. These are the disciples of Jesus. And then there is the 3, and then there is the 1. I said this on week 1. The 1 is John who writes the book of John. And he writes the book of John, and he calls himself John the Beloved, or John the one Jesus loves, because he wrote the book and he can write whatever he wants to write. But what we're going to talk about next week is how we can actually make that move towards complete surrender and total intimacy with God. Next week, do not miss next week. We have the author of the book, Dr. Robert Crosby, will be here speaking. I'm super excited about it. And he's going to talk about the 3 and then the 1. Today, I want to spend some time talking about what it means to move into the 12. Now, to understand this, let me go back a little bit and recap. First of all, we said on week 1 that there were the crowds. Other people in the places in the Bible would call this the multitudes. These were the people who watched from a distance. They watched and listened. They were interested in what Jesus had to say. They were kicking the tires of faith, so to speak, but they wanted to see the show. And this is a really great place to start, because everybody starts in the crowd at some point, but you can't stay there. And so some of those people that were in the crowd, they moved a little closer because they wanted to experience Jesus. And so then there was the 5,000. You read about this in all 4 Gospels, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, where Jesus takes a little boy's lunch and he feeds over 5,000 people. And this is a place of feeding and healing. And the truth is, I said this last week, many of us unfortunately stop there. The relationship with God is one-sided. It's all about what we can get from him instead of what we can bring. So last week we said, what if we made the move from observation to participation? What if we moved from watching on the outskirts to actively being involved in what Jesus is doing? And there was this group out of the 5,000 that emerged that was the 70. The 70 represent people who worked and served. And we challenged you last week. In fact, if you missed last week, we had these cards for everyone, and you can get one at guest services on your way out today. But this card was what we called Move to the 70. And the whole idea was we challenged everyone to take a moment to examine their heart and say, what gifts has God given me, and how can I leverage them to serve other people? And so we said last week, test drive. For 6 weeks, make a decision to jump in. And over 100 people made the decision that are not currently serving. There's hundreds of people who serve at our church, but over 100 people who are not currently serving made the decision to give God a shot and to try serving through the local church. And we're really excited about that, and those of you who joined us for that. Today, today, I want to take the next step. I want to move a little closer to Jesus towards being one of the 12. Now, Jesus had 12 disciples. They saw everything he did. I mean, they were up close and personal to everything he encountered. These 12, they experienced Jesus from a place of leaving and following. That's what I want to talk about today. And I'm going to be honest, today's kind of one of those dividing moments. Today's one of those Sundays where some of you are going to leave and you're not really going to want to come back, because the truth is, when you follow Jesus, it sometimes leads us to a place of difficulty, a place of uncomfortability, and today is that day. Now, to get us started today, I spent the formative years of my life, really kind of after college, working in marketing. And I love marketing, I love branding, and a lot of times what people think about when they think about branding is they think about a logo. The truth is, a logo is part of it, but really what branding is what do people think about when they think about your company. And so every company has some sort of a slogan that they hope helps to shape what people think. Think about M&M's. It melts in your mouth, not in your hands, right? McDonald's, ba-da-ba-ba-bop, I'm loving it, right? Taco Bell, ba-da-ba-ba-bop, all night in the bathroom. Like that's what, they all have something that comes to mind. This week, I found this list of things online, and the question was this: what would it look like if companies changed their branding to be actually really honest about what their company is? And so here's the first one, Best Buy. Try it out before buying it on Amazon. How many of you are guilty like me in this? Yeah. The next one is, I just love this, Hot Pockets. Every bite is a different temperature. You know that's true, right? McDonald's, because you've only got like $4, right? Here's one that I love. I eat a granola bar every morning. Nature Valley, crumbs everywhere, crumbs everywhere. I'm convinced in a Nature Valley pack, you get 2 granola bars, you eat the equivalent of one, and the other one is all over your car or your couch or wherever you tried to eat that. Here's one. You ever gotten this Pepsi? Is Pepsi okay? You ever had this one? On behalf of all Dr. Pepper drinkers, by the way, if you're here and you wait tables, I love people that serve. I served tables for years. If you wait tables and someone asks you if they have Dr. Pepper, an appropriate response is never, is root beer okay? That is not the same. You should lose your job. Here's another one. Hidden Valley Ranch makes vegetables bad for you, right? And this one is a shout out to my wife, Target, Walmart for the middle class, right? What if companies were real? And that's my wife. What if they told the truth? Now, here's the question I want to ask today. Okay. If Jesus had a PR firm, if Jesus had a marketing agency, what would Jesus' slogan be? If Jesus was really honest about who he is and what he was calling people to, what would his slogan be? And I would argue it might just be this, 2 words: follow me. Follow me. And many of us might think that Jesus' slogan would be, we just got to believe. We just got to trust. We've got to stop sinning. We've got to do certain things to appease him. But Jesus would just say these 2 words. He would just say, well, just follow me. This is found all throughout the Gospels. In fact, 20 different times, Jesus invites people to follow him. That's 4 times more than he invites people to believe in him. He invites people to follow him. And what I love about Jesus and the idea of following Jesus is when you follow him, all the stuff that you need to work out in your life, all the issues you need to work through, all the sin that's maybe been a struggle for you, the closer you get to Jesus, the more naturally that stuff begins to fall, because the closer you get to him, the more you become like him. Jesus invites everyone to belong, to follow him, before they ever believe everything. He invites people to belong, to follow closely, before they figured out all of the issues that's harming their soul. He just invites people to actually follow closely after him. Now, in the Bible, there's this interesting set of stories. Jesus was a first-century Jewish rabbi. He lived in an intensely Orthodox portion or region of the Galilee known as the Triangle, and most of his ministry happened there within just a few miles of each other. Jesus lived in a time where rabbis were seen as the celebrities. Now, in our culture, we have tabloids and we have People magazine and we have things, all the magazines you see when you check out at a grocery store. They didn't have those in those days, but if they did, it probably would have been about the rabbis. Because the rabbis, they were seen as the brightest and the smartest. That they were the most educated. They were the most brilliant. They were the brightest of the bright, the smartest of the smart. They had just made it through all the different levels of education. Now, in that culture, rabbis were revered. They were seen for all of their intellectual ability. They were the smartest and brightest in that culture, and everybody wanted to be like a rabbi. But in that culture, what you need to understand is so many people would try to become a rabbi, but they just didn't have it. They couldn't make it to that far. The closest example I could give is this, is I love sports. And when I was little, I played basketball in elementary school. I played basketball in middle school. I played basketball in high school. I won the MVP on one of my teams, which is a miracle in and of itself because I'm super short and ultra white. And I made it a certain level, but there was this point when I got to college when I just wasn't good enough to keep going. But there was a few who were good enough to play at the collegiate level. And then out of that large group of collegiate students, there was a few who were drafted into the NBA. And even in the NBA, there was a few who were decided to be all-stars. And then out of the all-stars, there was a select handful who were chosen to be Hall of Famers. You get the sense in sports that only the best keep going. Well, that's how it was in Jesus' day. Only the brightest and the smartest kept going through the education system. And when you became a rabbi, it was like the biggest deal ever. For those who didn't make it, for those who couldn't make it all the way to the rabbi level, they would usually drop out and just go back to whatever their family trade was. So if your family made sandals, you would make sandals. If your family designed tents, you might build tents. If your family pressed olives, you would press olives. But in Jesus' day, only the brightest and best made it to the level of rabbi, and Jesus was a rabbi. Now, everyone was interested whenever a rabbi would come to town because they wanted to hear, what is unique about you? What is it that you see when you read the scriptures that helps to reveal a different picture of who God is? In the same way we turn a gem and we see a different facet of the gem, what is it when you read the Bible and you turn it and you just look at it through different light? What is it that you see that maybe is different, that gives us a different picture of God? Now, because rabbis were the brightest and the best, one of the things that they would do is they would choose people to follow them. They would call them their disciples. Now, this term disciples is this ancient word. The Hebrew word is the word talmidim, which literally means people who would just follow closely and learn as students. And a rabbi, because he was the best, he only wanted to choose the brightest. He only wanted to choose the smartest, those who showed the most aptitude. Why? Because eventually they would carry on the legacy of you as the rabbi. But Jesus comes along, and he's a rabbi, and everyone wants to hear what he's going to say, and everyone wants to see what kind of miracle he's going to do. But Jesus did the whole disciple-picking thing very strange. In fact, look with me at Matthew chapter 4. It says this: as Jesus was walking beside the Sea of Galilee, he saw two brothers, Simon called Peter and his brother Andrew. They were casting a net into the lake, for they were what? Fishermen. Now, what does this say about these two brothers? It says they weren't the smartest. It says they weren't the brightest. That they had at some point or another dropped out of school and fallen back into the safety net of their family's business, and they're fishermen. They're out just doing their job. In verse 19, Jesus says this: come and follow me. There's Jesus' catchphrase, come follow me. And he said this: I will send you out to fish for people. Jesus takes the cultural norm of their day, which is what they were doing for work, and he flips it on its head and he says, I'm going to teach you how to not just fish for fish, but how to leverage your giftings and talents to fish for people, to lead people to know and follow me. That's what Jesus is saying. Now, try to imagine this before we go on. Imagine you're at work tomorrow and you're doing your job, you're 9 to 5, and you're grinding out another long, grueling day, and some celebrity, some hotshot, some person of influence shows up at your work and they say, hey, look, would you follow me? What would you do? Would you leave the place of safety and security? Would you leave the salary and the 401k? And would you leave the retirement? And would you leave the dental insurance? Would you leave all of that safety and security? And would you follow him? Well, look what happens to these two brothers. It says this: at once, like immediately, they didn't waste time. At once, they left their nets and they followed him. Why? Because this was a rabbi and he saw in them potential. He saw in them the capacity that maybe no one else had seen. And so naturally, they just left what they had because they didn't just want to follow to know what Jesus knew. Anyone can study a book. They wanted to become like him. It goes on, verse 21. Going on from there, he saw two other brothers, James, the son of Zebedee, which if you're looking for a boy's name, that's one, and his brother John. He goes on. They were in a boat with their father Zebedee, preparing their nets. And in parentheses, we could add why. Because they were fishermen. They had dropped out of school. They weren't the best and the brightest. And Jesus called them. And again, look what it says, immediately. They didn't waste any time. Immediately, they left the boat and their father and followed him. I just imagine Zebedee as this crotchety old man just sitting in the boat with his fishing rod just fishing. And all of a sudden, this hipster walks down the beach and he says, "Follow me." And the boys jump out of the boat. They don't even pull their pants up. They just run through the water and they follow. And Zebedee's just looking like, what just happened? Because a rabbi had called his boys to follow him. Now, this idea of following Jesus, where Jesus invites people, maybe not even the best, maybe not even the smartest, not even those who show the most aptitude, this idea of people following Jesus is all throughout Scripture. 20 times in the Gospels you see it. Here's a few examples. In Matthew chapter 4, "Come, follow me," Jesus says. Another one here, "One thing you lack, go sell everything you have and give it to the poor, and you will have treasure in heaven. Then come and do what? Follow me." That's in Mark chapter 10. It goes on, "My sheep listen to my voice. I know them and they follow me." John 10, verse 27, there's that follow language. "Whoever serves me must follow me. And where I am, my servants will also be." That's John 12. You see this over and over and over. This is the invitation of Jesus. He invites everyone to follow closely after him. Now, one of my favorite things lately has been this. At my house, I'm really into game shows. Now, my boys and I love game shows. We watch Wheel of Fortune and we watch Jeopardy. We're into Family Feud. We love Price is Right if I'm home during the day. I've always loved game shows. I've always wanted to be on a game show. But one of the things I've noticed as I watch game shows lately is all of the commercials are for medicine. If you watch sports, it's never about medicine. But if you watch game shows, it's about medicine, and it's about security alerts for people that are elderly, or the chair ramps that go up the stairs for people who can't walk up the stairs. It's like game shows are targeted at a certain demographic. Well, when my wife and I moved into our current house, we had this new living room that had a big wall, and I really wanted a big TV. And so for a while, I saved my money, and I found a guy on Craigslist who was selling a big 4K TV, ultra high definition, and he was selling it for a third of what I could get it at Best Buy. Now, I'm not one to ask questions about where he got it. This is an honest transaction on my part. So this dude just rolls up in an old BMW. I buy the TV from him. I'm shocked at how cheap I'm getting this awesome brand new TV. Then he leans over to me and whispers, "If you need any more, I got a hookup for you." And I was like, what does that even mean? Anyways, so I get this TV, it's on my wall, high definition. What I've noticed when I watch these commercials is there's lots of fine print. You ever paid attention to the fine print on these commercials? That there will be a commercial for a medicine that's like a weight loss medicine or something to help with your digestive system. And some of the fine print, if you actually pay attention, sounds way worse than what the medicine is actually trying to help you treat. It's like you've got an upset stomach and maybe a little bit of diarrhea, and you read it, and the bottom says things like, "This may also lead to depression, dementia, even death in some cases." It's like, I'd rather have the upset stomach, right? There's always fine print. Whenever you sign a contract, you should always pay attention to the things that people try to sneak into the fine print, because there is where the details are. And Jesus says, "Follow me." This is his big headline. I invite all of you, follow me, follow me, follow me. But there's fine print, and Jesus doesn't bury it. He doesn't hide it. But in Luke chapter 9, Jesus says to his disciples, here's the fine print. Here's what it looks like. He says this, "Then he," being Jesus, "said to them all, if anyone wants to follow after me, let him deny himself, take up his cross daily, and follow me." Now, for the sake of today, I'd like to look at the fine print through three different angles. The first, here's what it is. He says, if anyone, that's the first one, wants to follow after me, that's the second. And the third is they must deny themselves. These three simple things, and these are all massive deals. Each one of them builds upon each other, and each one has unbelievable significance to us. And this is the fine print. Jesus invites all of us, and here's what you need to know. The first thing is this. He says, if anyone wants to follow me, if anyone wants to be my disciple, to move in to the 12, he says, if anyone, here's what you need to know. Anyone means everyone. And for so many of us, the problem is that what we do is when we read about Jesus, we think to ourselves, yes, I want to follow Jesus from a distance, but I don't really want to get too close because I can't get too close. Why can't I get too close? Because you don't know all the stuff I've done. You don't know my past. You don't know the abuse that I've walked through. You don't know what my uncle did to me. You don't know the things that have been said over me. You don't know about my sexuality and my past. You don't know about the indiscretions and the things that I've done wrong. I could never get that close to Jesus, but Jesus says if anyone, and anyone means everyone. I love about Jesus that Jesus invites everyone to follow closely after him. And I think this is the reason. Jesus just knows that if everyone will follow closely after him, eventually what will happen is the more you spend time with him, the more you become like him. It's not that you just know everything that he knows. This isn't an intellectual gymnastic event. This is I want you to get close to me so you become like me. Jesus says, if anyone, and anyone means everyone, he says, if anyone wants to follow after me, and here's the thing you need to know. When he says follow after me, this means passionately pursue. Jesus invites all of us to passionately pursue him, but here's my problem. I'll just admit this about myself. I passionately pursue lots of things, but it's hard, if I'm honest, to passionately pursue Jesus. It's hard to make time for him. It's hard to get up early when I'm tired to spend time with him. It's hard to give faithfully when it's like money is already so tight. It's hard to trust him in those areas of my life. It's hard to passionately pursue him, but I don't have a hard time passionately pursuing other things. When my wife and I were just dating, man, I passionately pursued her. I flowers all the time. I bought out every stinking Hallmark card. I wish you would have bought stock in Hallmark before I started dating Liz, because I bought her so many cards. At one point, I think she asked me, you don't need to get cards all the time. But I'm like, girl, I'm crazy about you. I passionately pursued her. There was a summer where we were separated because we were still in college and we were separated. Any chance I got to spend time with her, if I was physically and emotionally exhausted and depleted, I would still travel to find her. Why? Because I was going to passionately pursue her. I have 3 kids and I passionately pursue them. This weekend, I took my 2 sons, Joey and Gavin, to Universal Studios for a couple days, and we call it every year Mancation. And Mancation is all about men just being men. We eat anything we want. We burp whenever we want. We don't have to wear pants in the hotel room. It don't matter. We're men doing manly things. And I told my boys this weekend, I was like, guys, can I ask you a question? Someday when we're like super old, like when you've got kids, not that having kids is super old, but when you have kids, can we still have Mancation? You and me and maybe someday your sons, can we still have Mancation? They're like, yeah, I have no problem pursuing them. A couple weeks ago, I took my little daughter Ella on a daddy-daughter vacation, just she and just me, and I have no problem passionately pursuing my kids because I love them. I love the Dallas Cowboys, and I passionately pursue them. I read the news and the rumors about them every single day. For the first time in my life, I have stocks. Never owned stocks before, but I have stocks. And you know what I do with those stocks? I pursue them passionately. I check them every single day because I want to know how is my stock and how is my money performing. It's funny because we have no problem passionately pursuing things that matter to us, and yet we struggle when it comes to passionately pursuing Jesus. Look at this verse. In the book of 1 John, John uses this fascinating word. He says this. He says the world and its desires, and the desires he's talking about are in the preceding verses where he says we have the lust of the eyes and the lust of the flesh and the sinful nature of man. He says these desires pass away, but whoever does the will of God lives forever. This word in Greek is this fascinating word. It's epithumia, which literally means hyper desire. And all of us have things that we desire, things that we want desperately, things we even lust after in some way. And what Jesus is saying is there's nothing wrong with liking other things, but I just want to come in and offer you something better, something that means more. I want to replace that desire with a desire that's even greater, which is the desire to be close to me. Like over and over in the series, this is the common theme. Jesus isn't inviting us to give up stuff or to serve and work harder for the sake of just doing more stuff. He's inviting us to do these things so we can draw closer and closer to him. If anyone means everyone, wants to follow after me, to passionately pursue, epithumia, to passionately pursue, they must deny themselves. And this is the hardest one because deny means total surrender. Can I admit something to you? This is the hardest one for me as an American because I work really, really hard. And I do a lot of stuff to try to make myself the leader, to try to make myself invincible, to try to protect myself financially, to try to give my family the best life. And Jesus comes along and he's like, if you want to be my disciple, if you want to move closer to the 12, you have to deny yourself once and for all, total surrender. You know, it's funny because in church world, we use phrases like Jesus is Lord. I don't know if you ever stop to think about the words we say, but when we say words like Lord, what is a Lord? It's someone who completely rules over. Now, in the Bible, you could also take this language and you could apply it to the concept of slavery. Now, when we think of slavery, we have such a negative connotation that comes to our mind because of the issues, the terrible decisions of our forefathers here in America. But there's two different kinds of slavery. The first one is slavery against someone's will. That's what we had in our country that still exists in parts of the world. It has to die in our generation. But there's another kind of slavery that Jesus is inviting us to. It's this idea of being what's called a bondservant or a bond slave. You read sometimes in the rest of the New Testament, places like Paul or James, will they introduce themselves and they'll say, Paul, a bondservant of Christ. Here's the difference. The first kind of slave is someone who serves against their will, but a bondservant is someone who willfully said, I'm coming to you and I'm submitting my whole life to your authority. Whatever you say, I'll do. Whatever you ask, I'll say yes. Whatever you need, I'm your person. I'll do whatever you need. And Jesus says this, if you want to be my follower, if you want to make that move from observation to participation and from participation to closeness, you have to understand that all of us have to give up something to surrender once and for all to the lordship of Jesus. So here's a question for you. What are the areas in your life that you haven't fully, completely surrendered? Maybe you've said this. You said, I want Jesus to be Lord of my life except in my relationship. I want Jesus to be Lord of my life, but I'm still going to live with my boyfriend. I want Jesus to be Lord of my life as long as he doesn't want to touch my finances. I want Jesus to be Lord of my life as long as it has nothing to do with my work or my sexuality or my health. I want Jesus to be Lord of my life as long as it doesn't interfere with the things that I don't want him to touch. What are the areas where you haven't fully, completely surrendered? Let me end with this question, and it's this. If following Jesus cost you everything, would it still be worth it? Would you still do it? If it cost you everything you have, would you still follow him? Jesus invites all of us to move from the crowds, the place of observation, to the 5,000 where it's like he's meeting our needs, he's healing and feeding us. To take the next step in a little closer to the 70 where we work and we use our energy and our talents that are uniquely intertwined in who we are to serve other people. And then he invites us to move past that to a place of leaving and surrendering, a place of leaving home and leaving comfort and leaving the safety net of this world and saying, Jesus, I once and for all, with everything I am, totally surrender to you. It's all yours. Everything I have, all of it is yours.